Hey everybody, this is Taylor Sparks, and I've got a bit of an unusual video today. I actually got some really great questions recently about what's it like to be a professor. So kudos go to Tuan Trong. This is him here. He's a PhD student at Texas A&M University, and he just had a bunch of really great questions. And I figured instead of responding to him just directly, probably other people might have some of these same questions if you're thinking about what's it like to be an academic. So I'm just going to take his questions and we're just going to go through some of these. And if you're interested, pay attention. I'll put links to each question in the timestamps below, so you can just jump right to them. But his first question was like, "Hey, when did you want to become a professor? Would appreciate to know your thought process back then and why you ended up choosing a professorship, of course, if you still recall." So it's a great question. Actually, probably the time that I first thought about it was in 2004. So 20, gosh, it's a long time ago, 22 years ago, is that right? It was actually here in this room. I was a TA for the Introduction to Material Science and Engineering class as an undergrad. And it was awesome, right? I loved it. I got to help other students learn, and I really got a kick out of it. And so, yeah, over 20 years ago, I first had the idea like, boy, this being a professor thing might be kind of cool. But I still thought I was headed to industry, right? When I went to grad school, I definitely had my sights set on industry. I wanted to go work for General Electric. And I actually got an interview out there, and they didn't hire me because I told them that I just wanted to do a postdoc because I was considering other companies, right? And I think that they saw somebody that didn't have their mind made up. And so I don't blame them for not hiring me. But they passed. And at that point, I was looking for any opportunity I could find, and I found an old colleague of mine who'd been on my master's thesis committee, became my postdoc advisor. This was Dr. Ram Seshadri at Santa Barbara, amazing guy. And when I went to work with him, 1 month into the job, this position opened up here at Utah, and so I applied for it. So it was very much not something that I ever had my heart set on. It's really hard to be a faculty, and I knew that. I knew that it's very, 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 very competitive, and so really it was when my other options to go to industry hadn't worked out like I thought they would, and this thing just sort of happened. That kind of got me here. And then just one other thing I'll mention is, when I applied for the job, it is crazy competitive, and I was not a strong candidate back then. I only had like 5 publications, and now that I've been on the reviewing end of applicants, they typically are much stronger than I was. And so it's interesting, they actually brought out 5 people to be interviewed for the job. And I was one of those, I think largely because they remembered me. I was an undergrad from the department. I went to the right places. I had a decent background. I sort of was above the bar, but I think they were more curious to see, like, okay, what has one of our students gone on to do and what would it look like to interview him? But regardless, they actually made the offers to all 4 people ahead of me. And all those people took jobs elsewhere. God bless them. A couple of our friends of mine. So I really, everything I'm going to tell you today about being a professor realizes like one data point, and that's my data point. And it's not typical. Nobody's story is typical. You have to talk to a lot of people to really understand it. But that was my story. I didn't know I was going to be a professor. It was sort of luck. I really got lucky. It fell in my lap, and I'm grateful for it. But it wasn't something I totally planned. In retrospective, have you ever thought of switching to industry? Why or why not? That was a great question. I have thought of going to industry a couple of times. And there's a couple of reasons, right? For one thing, you will make more money in industry, no doubt about it. There's more questions on finances coming later. But also, you work on different types of projects, a little bit more applied, a little bit closer to application. In academia, material science and engineering is a cool field because we are both science and engineering, and most departments are not that. In other words, in this department, you can be kind of as applied as you want to be. Well, as engineering professors get, right? You can just make devices if you want, right? Or you can study really fundamental atomic interactions, right? And kind of everywhere in between. That said, even though my group does a little bit of both for sure, sometimes it's alluring to think of industry for the pay, the connection to a product that will actually impact people's lives, the ability, or this is me probably being naive, but thinking, boy, it'd be great to just turn it off, have just a regular 9 to 5 and not have to worry about work after 5 p.m. Although I think once you get a PhD, that I don't know how realistic that is, even in industry. Anyways, Next question is, what does your spouse think about your career? Do you ever get pushback from anyone along the way? Great question. My spouse is amazing. She has sacrificed a lot to make my career possible, and I'm just wildly grateful for it. I would say overall it's been really great. But like everything, there's trade-offs and there's caveats. For example, this job's awesome. If my wife she has a doctor's appointment or something, she can just tell me, and I can just plan on being home. Like on any given day of the week, like my hard constraints are relatively few. I pretty much make my own schedule, right? As a professor, you do teach, but you don't teach all that much. A typical university professor, if you're at a research active university where you're doing research, then you're probably only teaching one, maybe two classes a semester. Very rarely would you teach more than that. And students know that if it's a class is basically maybe 3 hours a week of lecturing, you might have a lab, but your total amount of time that you're actually required to be there from a teaching perspective is not that much. It might only be 3 or 4 hours a week that you have to be in the classroom, which means the rest of the time is kind of yours to fill as you want to fill it, right? That said, my academics tend to work a lot, but it's flexible, right? If I need to be home one day, we can do it. If my kids have fall break, I can even cancel classes. Like it's pretty much the most flexible job that I could imagine having. Even people that are self-employed are beholden to customers with rigid schedules, and in academia, that's awesome. But on the flip side of that, you do work a lot, and you do tend to bring that work and that stress home. I don't know, maybe, I don't know if it's more than industry. I have this feeling that it's more than industry, but maybe that's not true. So that is definitely a pushback. Like instead of just chilling at night, and watching a show, I'm often like clearing out emails that I didn't get through in the day or responding to student questions it's always an emergency, right? And that's evolved over my career. My ability to put more like work-life boundaries has gotten better for sure. But yeah, I would say that my spouse is a big fan of it. It's taken us places that we never would have dreamed. More on that in a moment. But it's allowed us to do things and have flexibility that's been awesome. To live in a great place. We were lucky in that my wife and I are both from Utah. We grew up 25 minutes here from the University of Utah, maybe 20. And it's pretty rare to land an academic job in your hometown. Like that's very hard to land an academic job, period. So then when you put a constraint on it that, hey, you only want to do it where you're from, it just doesn't happen. Like we're blessed and fortunate that we were able to be near family because we both have lots and lots of family nearby, and that was important to us. So yeah, I would say overall spouse is very, very positive to this career. On the financial side, this question's good. It says, what's your honest perspective on the financial side? There's a lot of naysaying compared to industry and academia. Maybe this next one as well. Do you feel like your salary has been a struggle or is it pretty comfortable? I'd love to hear how it was both before tenure and how it feels now. Great questions. So some of these things you can look up. I've done a little Googling for you. So here I just asked, look up some average salaries for material science, engineering professor, statistics, and it's honestly all over the place. Like for assistant professors, this Glassdoor, they've got people saying that they make 200K a year. There are no assistant professors making 200K a year. That's just not happening. But university job postings a little more accurate, roughly 100K to 150 that's your 9-month base. Remember, most universities hire you for 9 months of the year, and the other 3 months of the year, if you're at a teaching college where there's no research expectation, you might well take that summer off. Maybe you go to a cabin for the summer. In reality, most faculty do work during the summers, and you can even charge your time to maybe a research grant. I'll put 1 month of my time on a research grant if I'm able to, right? So you're still working year round for the most part. It is more flexible during the summer. But these 9-month salaries, they're probably a little bit high. I think most faculty are starting, again, the numbers that I'm sort of familiar with are a little less than this. I'll say that myself, it was 13 years ago, but I started in like the 70s. It was really low. Remember, I was candidate number 5 of 5, so I think that they basically rolled the dice and said, maybe we get them cheap, it's worth it. So it was low, way low compared to industry. Had I gone to industry, I think it would have been 2x higher. And I've closed that gap, I think, pretty significantly now later in my career, but still industry is going to pay higher. Again, more numbers here, 112, 145. For associate professors, you're looking at 160 to 245. That's a little high, I think, probably between 120 and 180, I would say, for most associate professors. It totally depends. There's ranges, right? And then full professor can be between 200 and 450. 450 seems very high to me. I've seen faculty in the high upwards of close to 300 at really, if they're ballers at great universities. But 200, I think, is even a little bit high as well. So all these seem a bit inflated to me. Here it says average estimates show that it's 163K a year for a generic professor. That seems a little bit low. There's some aggregated sources, and then you can always just look it up, right? If it's a state school, you can just look it up. Most states have transparency laws where you can just look up their salaries. But generally speaking, has it been a struggle or is it comfortable? I would say when we first moved back to Utah, Utah was a cheap place to live. During COVID, a lot of people moved here and made it expensive. So it's become, the cost of living has now risen. It used to be significantly lower than the average. Now it's higher than the average. But I do not feel a struggle at all. It is a comfortable job. Yeah, you would make more in industry, but it's very comfortable. So that's honest. My honest opinion is that it not only is it comfortable, but I think that you have a lot of control in how much money you make, because ultimately you're worth what you're worth, right? And even though, for example, take my situation where I was hired really low, because most departments have incentive-based, raises. If you're a hustler and you're doing really well at your job, teaching a lot of courses, bringing in a lot of research grants, publishing a lot of papers, doing all extra things, then you have additional incentive for you to get a larger raise each year. Other things you can do is you can actually leverage a retention offer. I did that at around the time that I was offered tenure in 2019. I actually had an offer from another university, and I leveraged that for a significant retention offer where now you're not just getting a small increase every year from, getting a raise. Now that was a significant raise to reach parity with what the university, elsewhere was offering me. So basically what I'm saying is if you're good, you're going to get paid more. Like, I like that about academia, that it allows for, and again, not everyone's equal, but at least here at Utah, it is structured in a way that there's an incentive for you to perform, both in terms of getting additional summer salary pay, but also just your base salary is going to go up if you're a hustler. So if you really want to get after it, you can. It says, if it's possible, could you have a little breakdown in your regular salaries during summer and sabbatical? Please don't show your exact number. Well, first off, you can look up my exact number if you want. But so yeah, like I said, you have your 9-month salary, and then you've got 3 more months during the summer. Technically, you could actually get all of your 9-month salaries during the academic year, but most people spread it out over the calendar year. So basically, you're getting paid 75% of your paycheck, but you're getting it for the whole year instead of 100% of your paycheck for 9 months. But some people choose to do it differently. How easy is it to fill those 3 months of summer salary? That's a good question. If you are very research active, then you'll be able to fill your summer salaries. You won't have any extra months of time available to put on projects, even if you wanted to. But most faculty don't reach that point. Most of them might have 1 month of their summer salary active at a time, maybe 2 months. It's rare to do all 3. I've been fortunate here at Utah. I've had a big research group ever since I came, and I think I've been able to fully max out my effort pretty much continuously for 13 years, right? Which is awesome. It means that I'm busy, but it's a nice benefit that if you're going to be writing and winning all those grants, that you can pay yourself for it, right? Sabbatical is interesting. I did do a sabbatical. I went to England with my family. Every university is different on sabbatical. I wrote a couple articles about it, which I can put in the show notes below if you're interested, where I summarize my feelings on it. But basically, most universities, if you're gone for a whole year, if you take a whole sabbatical, which you are eligible to take at most universities on your 7th year, so you teach for 12 semesters, 6 years, then on your 7th year, you're eligible for a sabbatical. Doesn't mean you're guaranteed a sabbatical. You still have to apply for it. You have to make a good case for why it's useful for this university to let you leave. Like, you can't just be like, hey, I'm going to go sit on a beach somewhere. Like, that's not going to fly. You have to make a compelling case for it. Utah's pretty awesome. They actually, if you're gone for the full time, you get 80% of your salary. Now, that's awesome. Most universities, if you're gone for the whole year, then you only get 50% of your salary. So that means that the other 50%, you either have to just eat it, just take a huge loss, or you have to find some sort of fellowship that would make up the difference. I was fortunate, A, in that my university covers 80% of my salary, but also because I was able to pick up a fellowship that covered the difference. I went to the United Kingdom. I was based out of University of Liverpool, great place, awesome people. But I also was fortunate to receive a Royal Society Wolfson Visiting Fellowship where it paid the difference, which was amazing. Plus a little bit of extra for things like lab supplies in the UK and a little bit of travel, which was just so grateful for that. It would be hard to do a sabbatical without that type of support, especially because I've got 4 kids. I mean, just the applying for visas alone and airfare, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars for my family of 6 to make that all happen was not cheap. And then you have to find a place to live and a vehicle, and you have to deal with the place that you've been living. For us in Salt Lake, we had to find someone to rent our home for a year, somewhere to put our vehicles. It's just somebody had to watch our dog, right? So financially, sabbaticals are tricky, but amazing if you can pull it off. Okay, some other questions about work-life balance. Says some professors claim that they have no work-life balance, that they just work all the time. How true is this? Again, I'm one data point, but my perspective on this is that most faculty tend to work much more than that they wish they'd like to. Let me rephrase that. So remember here, this is just my one data point. I think most faculty end up working way more than they would like. They put in a lot of hours, and there's a bit of a culture of worshiping work, right? Of like the grind culture where you sort of get like kudos from your fellow professors if they see you here working on a Saturday, or they'll give you sort of like props if you did something really gnarly. I submitted 20 proposals this year, like, oh, yeah, way to go, man. They don't ask like, oh, to do that, what about time with your kids? Or like, were you taking care of your mental health? Or were you like, they don't ask that part of it. They just sort of respect the grind. So that's a problem. That's a real problem in academia. So when this stereotype exists for a reason. The joke is that in academia, you can work any 60 hours a week that you want, as if to say like you're going to work 60 hours a week, but they can be whenever you want. You want to work at midnight, you can do it. It's unfortunately fairly true. I will say that I have not done that exactly. Like when I took this job, I had how old was he? He was 2 years old. I had a 2-year-old son, and I had a daughter that had just been born. And I was thinking to myself, if I really do stay at work until 7 o'clock every night, I'm gone from 7 to 7, working 12 hours a day, which you can easily do because there's so much to be done. I was like, I'll never see my kids. And I'm just not willing to make that trade. I remember reading a really impactful article. It was something like How I Learned to Love the 7-Year Postdoc or something like that. It was an article written by an assistant professor at Harvard where she basically was grappling with the same question, saying like, I'm not going to get tenure if I don't work crazy hours. And so her takeaway, as I recall, this was 13 years ago, my memory, but I think that her takeaway in the article was something like, treat it like it's a 7-year postdoc, right? Meaning if you don't get tenure after 7 years, then who cares? Like you had a great experience, you learned some things, and you'll go on, you'll be successful doing something else. But it's not worth losing 7 years to just like completely have no work-life balance. That's how I viewed it. I was like, I'm not willing to not see my kids for 7 years until I get tenure. Because again, at the beginning of your 7th year, you're either tenured or you're fired at most universities, tenure track universities anyways. And I just wasn't willing to trade those years of life time with my kids. Like if I get done at 7 and I have to drive home, I'm there and my kids are basically in bed already, or like just about to be, my little kids anyways. And I'm just not willing to trade that. So I didn't. I left every day at 4 p.m. I would go to work at like normal hours, like 8 a.m. or something, get to work a little before 9, and I would leave by 4 so that I could actually spend some time with my kids in the evening. And then once they would go to bed at 7 or 8 in the evening, yeah, I would usually work that first year, especially for an hour or two, typically 2 hours probably a night. But then those pre-tenure years, that time that I would spend working in the evenings shrunk and shrunk. And now I only work in the evenings when I want to, now that I've made full professor. Now that's a luxury that I have. But I think that you kind of decide what you want to do. And me personally, I made that decision that I just wasn't going to work crazy hours to the point where I wouldn't see my wife, kids, or have other interests, which is sort of a segue to the next question. It says, I noticed that you've picked up some hobbies. P.S. I like your song, Thick Brown River. that you've found time to travel around while you're raising a big family. How do you manage it? What's your thought process on doing things like this as a professor? It feels super important to me. I'd love to hear any strategies that you use. Something like whether having postdocs help with grants or automating tasks, giving students more freedom, etc. A quick breakdown of how you split your time between meetings, students, podcasting, running companies, if you have, we do, teaching, and everything else would be awesome. So there's a lot there. So let's just start with some of the hobbies. I mean, if you want to learn all about it, you can check out my Instagram. That's where you can see most of my hobbies. T_Sparks. You can see it. Like, you'll notice that like I love like to be doing things with my family and doing things outdoors. I love skiing. You can see like nothing better than getting out with my dog and like skiing in the mountains by my house. Like, it's the best. I love to do that sort of stuff. I do have a big family. Like, here's just the nieces and nephews on my side of the family. There's like 14 of them. There's another 46 on my wife's side. And spending time with them, mountain biking, exploring, taking my kids backpacking. Here we are up in the, Idaho mountains. Like, this is all really important to me. So I do make time for it. That was actually one of my takeaways from my sabbatical. Let me pull that article up really quick. So I wrote these 3 articles about lessons I learned from my sabbatical, and this was one of my takeaways, right? So here are my 3 takeaways from being on sabbatical. First is to be intentional. Like, when we were on sabbatical, my wife had told me, like, we've got 52 weeks in a year, so let's go on 52 adventures. And we just planned it. We really planned on not wasting a single weekend. And you can see it. Like, here is a silly picture of us on our time in England. Here's my Google map. Look at all those like hearts and flags. Hearts are places that we went, that we had like a great time. And the green flags are places that we were trying to go to. Like, we sat down and we planned stuff ahead of time, right? We scheduled it, and by scheduling it and blocking that time off, we just made sure that it happened. So if you go into academia, I think this is a helpful advice to remind people, like, hey, you should just like set aside time and make sure that it happens. The third takeaway was this idea of pruning your life. So this came from it's an article from, I like to grow, I've got a garden at home and I love to grow things. And I was learning about how do you prune a tree, and it showed like what'll happen to, I can't remember what type of tree this was, but if you let it, some of these trees will just go nuts. But if you prune it, then it will just send that energy into a few important things. And my takeaway here in terms of, academia is that we should be pruning our lives. What you'll find if you go into academia is that there is a gazillion different ways that you can spend your time. There's students every day knocking on the door with ideas. There's people that want to collaborate with you. You'll have way more than you can ever do, like way more. And I'll show you my calendar in a moment. And so you have to prune your life. You have to cut out the stuff that you don't care about and just intentionally make room for the things that are important to you and that you do care about. Anyways, I think that you can do it. Like, you have to make time for it. You have to make it a priority, but you can totally do it. I love spending time with my family. It's something I absolutely love. Some strategies. I already told you a couple strategies, like being intentional, carving out time, cutting out things that don't matter. You've got some more practical ones here, like, do you have postdocs help with your team? Do you automate tasks? Do you give your student freedoms? This is something I'm a big believer in. I tell my students all the time that I already got my PhD, right? They are here getting their own PhD. It's not mine, it's theirs. I expect them to really lead their projects and take ownership. That frees up time from me, but it also, I think, it empowers them, because part of the PhD process, arguably the main part of the PhD process, is learning how to learning how to do stuff. And if your advisor does it all for you, then you've missed out on one of your key trainings, right? I do have a fairly big research team here at Utah. If you go to my webpage, you can see, but we have postdocs, we have visiting professors. Here's 2 sort of PhD level researchers that are involved in my group, and then a bunch of PhD students. And these PhD students manage a bunch of work, either work in tandem with master students, but they also work with a bunch of undergraduates. And the only way to do that is to sort of trust people, to rely on them to take ownership of projects, and then you don't micromanage. You check in with them and you hold them accountable, but I don't try and manage it myself. And then it says a quick breakdown of how you split your time between meeting students, running meetings, podcasting, all of that would be great. So yeah, that's a really hard question. Every week's different. Like, here's just a sample. So this is from last year. I'll just zoom in on a week, right? On any given week, this is in the middle of summer. So let me go back. And we'll go to one during the school year. So we'll go to like Here's April. This is near the end of the semester. Things are going to be busy. First, at a glance, what you see is like these big things in red are when we have travel. In this case, that was my wife traveling. Most of the time, those are when I'm traveling. Like, for example, I was in Chicago for this big workshop. And then right after that, I went to England and I was in England. And after that, we went to Finland. And after that, I was in Israel. So, like, basically, like a month straight of travel. Really, it was. It was a month straight of travel. That was a little extreme, but travel is something on the job that I was totally unprepared for how much that would be. But here's what a typical week might look like. Again, the timeline, look here, like from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m., it's like pretty busy. There are empty spots here and there, right? There's empty hours here and there, but mostly my time gets booked out. Again, this was an unusual week because I was making sure that I was home to do pickups and drop offs from school because my wife was out of town that week. But on a normal week, you can look at it, right? You've got time set aside for like defenses. The blue ones are classes. The purple is my group meeting. A bunch of one-on-one meetings. There's always these people trying to like pitch ideas. They want you to help run a conference. Maybe they want to, yeah, like there's lots of remote meetings. There's lots of stuff to do. And you kind of have to decide like how much of your time are you going to allow them to book. And what I've found is that when I need to write grants, I'll literally like schedule in time, like, put in 3 hours there where I'm just going to do grant writing. And then you have to actually stick to that, right? Like make sure that you actually hold yourself to that time. If it's important, make time for it. But yeah, this is very typical. If you look at, we'll just jump to today for a moment. Like here's my week this week. I'm going to Galveston for a conference, right? And then you've got a defense tomorrow, my classes. I have to figure out what I'm going to do with my classes while I'm gone. In this case is I've got a great TA that's going to help run my informatics class while I'm gone. I have online videos that he can sort of lean on. My other class, I have to have other faculty cover for it, which is okay because we're team teaching. All of my normal group meetings with my students, I have to fit in some other time. So this is just what a typical week looks like. Here was last week, right? It's just filled with stuff. And again, if you want to make time for like backcountry skiing, which is important to me, I just put it on the calendar and then I like really stick to it. Yeah, it requires, again, I'll just say this. I never used a calendar before I had this job. I just didn't need to. And now, if you're going to do all the things that you're doing, you really have to manage your time. So find a good calendar. There's different apps. There's task tracking apps, but that becomes critical if you want to be successful. Asks here, how did you spend your day then, before tenure, and now? How do you keep up your productivity? Honestly, it probably looks the same. If we look at like the year and we go back to pre-tenure days, like, I don't know, 2018 was like fever pitch before tenure. And then we go like look at a random week here. It basically looks the same. Like here, there's more travel for a conference. I'm going to something. So I've got some travel in there. We're driving to Vegas for another conference. A rare week where nothing was going on there. That is very rare. I wonder what that was. But check it out. Like it's just filled with stuff. It's always filled with meetings. You're always meeting with people. Like CER grant writing. I spent the whole day. I just blocked it off to write grants that day. Right. That was important. So we went ahead and did it. And so that's how I've managed it. Is just for 13 years, I've just filled up my calendar. And honestly, I think that I've gotten better at it. I'm more busy than I was before because I'm more capable than I was as a pre-tenure faculty. So my calendar's a little more packed. And it's honestly upon me to decide, am I overdoing it or not? And should I scale it back? And should I schedule more time for other things, right? What are my boundaries? Do you work weekends? No work after 10 p.m., etc. Yeah, I've had to start putting boundaries. Like when I took the job, I had like a 2-year-old and a brand new baby. But now, 13 years later, I've got a 15-year-old, right? And I've got a 12-year-old, and I've got a 10-year-old, and I've got a 5-year-old. I've got these big kids. And my evenings are really valuable. Like we spend time teaching our kids things, and we have family scripture study. We're religious, and we want to spend time bringing them values. And now they have activities they're learning. They go to piano practice and dance practice, and I don't want to just be absent for that stuff. So I have increasingly put much more strict boundaries on my evenings. Again, jumping to this, this is an unusual one because I'm traveling this week. But if we look at, say, actually I'm traveling next week as well. But like this one, you see that all these things in the evenings, not work. I did have to log in to turn something in very quickly. Family stuff, church stuff, friend stuff. I really try and make 5 p.m. my cutoff, where it's one thing if you log in for something brief, but like I try not to work in the evenings anymore, and I work my tail off during the day where I can help it. And then I think this is a funny question. No pun intended, but how much sleep do you get each night? I've had actually a bunch of people ask me, other faculty, they're like, dude, between the podcast and all the stuff you do, your YouTube channel, when do you sleep? And how much time do you spend with your kids daily? And this person's asking because starting a family is important to them. Good for you, by the way. I can actually tell you, I have this fancy watch, right, that tracks my sleep. And I was just curious, like, how many hours of sleep do I get? And I checked it out. And for the last year, I get 7 hours and 42 minutes of sleep on average, right? So I feel like sleep is a priority for me. So I make sure I go to sleep early. I'm somebody who loves to wake up early and go hiking or skiing in the morning, in the winter, or mountain biking in the rest of the year. And the only way that you can wake up at 4:30 a.m. or 4:45 a.m. is if you're getting to bed early. So we try and get our kids to bed by 8:30, 9 o'clock. And honestly, if I'm gonna wake up early the next morning to go on a big adventure, I'm like going to bed right after that if I can help it. That's just me though. My wife's a night owl. She likes to stay up later. You have to kind of decide. Spending time with your kids daily. Again, I like to be home by 5 at the latest most days, or 5:30 if it's a late day, because I live close to the university. And then I'm with my kids, engaged with them until they go to bed. So from call it 5 till 8:30 every night. I'm also there in the mornings. I help do the drop-offs. I think that's important, that I don't have just my wife. My kids have this amazing gift of their mom being home to care for them, that she doesn't have to work, which is, I know, not something that everyone can do, but it's been amazing. But it also is a heavy burden for my wife to just only be around kids most of the day, and to have all the drop-offs. For example, we have 4 kids going to 4 different schools. So the drop-offs and pickups become a real pain in the butt. So I make sure that I'm there to help get them ready in the morning, to do breakfast with them, and to help do 2 of the drop-offs. My wife does the other 2, and then she does the pickups most days. So it's about balance. That's what we do. You got to find your own balance. On the tenure path, he says, what were your first years before getting tenured in terms of workload, work focus, finance, personal life, emotional well-being? I've kind of covered some of this, but I'll just say that it was more stressful. You're worried about proving yourself still. Like, you did a PhD and you learned some skills, but nobody really knows you yet. They knew your advisor. The big part of getting tenure is mostly people learning to respect you as opposed to your advisor. And that's stressful. You're trying to make a name for yourself. You don't know how to write. Well, yeah, I'm sure most people are aware, when you become an academic, you have to do all these things like teaching, writing grants, managing people, like writing reports, dealing with conflict, all this stuff that you probably had little or maybe even zero training to do, right? That's crazy. You had no training. You were a really good researcher, and when you become an academic, you stop being a researcher and you become a facilitator of research. And so those first few years is like learning all these new skills, whether it's teaching or running a group or dealing with a student who isn't motivated. Like, maybe you never had that problem, but you have students that you have to work with now. And so that's really hard. It was a fulfilling period of time because you're learning new skills, and there's something really rewarding about learning new skills. Like, I was not a good grant writer when I started, but I think I'm a great grant writer now. Like, and that's fun to level up those skills. So your work focus too, you come to the job thinking that you're going to work on one thing, but really you're probably going to evolve and change. Like, when I came here at Utah, I thought I was going to be like my PhD advisor and work on like thermal barrier coatings, like purely experimental. And now my group is predominantly computational. We do machine learning, we do artificial intelligence. I had no business doing that. I've said many times that I only took one coding class in my life, and it was in high school. So to have that be my main emphasis means that we have really shifted, which is, it stretches you to learn something new, but it's really enjoyable. I've found I've loved that freedom to chase what you're interested in and chase funding and opportunity. Like, I've liked that. So the first years were very, very busy. I had young kids, right? They're not sleeping at night. We're having new babies. We are a little bit tighter on income. Like, everything was more challenging for sure. That became a lot easier post tenure. We got a big, you always get a pay raise after tenure, but in my case was significant because we turned down an offer somewhere else and we got a big retention offer. I got a brand new lab. That was part of my retention offer, was to completely renovate our lab space, and now it's beautiful. And then when you go from associate professor with tenure, uh, some unspecified period of time, it doesn't have to happen in 6 years like pre-tenure, but at some point, in my case, it was about 5 years after, you want to go up for full professor. And to go from associate professor with tenure to full professor, you basically have to do everything you did as a tenure case again, which means people have to know who you are, have to make a name for yourself, you have to bring in a bunch of money, publish a bunch of papers, have that notoriety and international reputation again. Basically show like, can lightning strike twice? Was it like a one-off, or can you do it again? And then you get full professor. At least here at Utah, that's how it goes. And now that I've been granted full professor, it's awesome, right? Not just in terms of like the pay, but you can be like a full citizen in the department. And what I mean by that is like, you can now vote and participate in every activity. You can be a department chair if you want. Like I recently became director of graduate affairs for my college. Probably not something they would have let an associate professor do, right? It's cool to have like all the doors open and simultaneously like no more rungs in the ladder that you feel like you ought to climb if you don't want to. Now, if you want to, you could try and be an associate dean. You could try to be a dean. You could go towards admin of the university, aim for a provost if you want, or whatever, right? Like there's always ladders, I suppose, if you want, or rungs on the ladder. But I feel like for me, this is just a really sweet spot where I have, the full respect of the community. You can lead big centers. Typically an assistant professor, even associate's probably not going to lead a $10 million, $20 million grant. Those are typically the full professors because you've got just more experience. You've dealt with managing bigger groups. You've dealt with multi-PI projects. I love that. I love that aspect of the job now. That confidence that I have, and obviously the game just gets easier. The more well known you are. I don't love this about the way that it works, but really it's true that in academia, it's kind of who you know and it's reputation based, which means the more well known you are, the further are in your career, everything's easier. Like I used to get desk rejected from journals where they're like, we don't know who you are, and your paper gets rejected, even if it was a good paper. Now, because people know us, I feel like we get accepted to conferences, we win grants, we get papers published. It's all just easier. Recruiting students, every part of the job is easier as a full professor. So I won't pretend it isn't. It does make me feel an obligation, like a responsibility, to lift the burdens of the young assistant professors in my department now. Because it's like, bang, I remember how hard that was. So I should make sure that they have, a leg up because it is challenging. What are some of the unsung challenges you've faced? Yeah, I mean, we've said how cool it is, like the travel, and just a note on that. I actually asked ChatGPT to look through my webpage. I keep a track on my webpage of every time that we publish things. This is part of the job. There's a lot of bean counting. You have to count your articles and presentations. So I always put it in my news. I recently had ChatGPT look through that and then extract all the places I've traveled and create this interactive map. Like this is amazing. Check it out. Like you can see the different colors are whether I attended like there to give a seminar, like this is a seminar, or if I went there for like an industry interaction or whatever. But look at like parts of the world that I never would have ever gone to. Like my buddies that grew up in me, like never traveled to some of these places. And I've been able to do things that I just never dreamed of. And around the world, like again, obviously on my sabbatical in the UK, we talked all over the place. But Italy, Turkey, throughout the Middle East, China, Japan, like that's been really cool part of the job. But the flip side of that coin is a lot of travel and being away from my kids and my family and the burden that puts on them. So that's a real challenge. I think there's also another challenge, like you talked about, one of the unsung challenges is it's pretty depressing the way that we fund science. It is extremely difficult to win grants, right? Especially when you're new. But if you just look at like the average funding rate, it's something like 10%, maybe upwards of 15%. That means that you're going to spend, weeks writing your grants. When I write a grant, it's typically 2 to 3 weeks of effort on my part. It's faster now in the world with LLMs, but you're still spending a lot of time. Some of them you're spending months on. So you're going to spend upwards of months on something that has a 10% chance of winning. That's just a bummer. It means that for every 10 submissions, you get 9 reject emails that are just bummers. And oftentimes it's clear that the reviewers didn't read your grant, that they didn't understand what you're saying. Maybe that's because they didn't read it closely. Maybe it's because you weren't a good communicator. But it's a lot of rejection, right? And for a field that is inherently attracts high performers that tend to have high egos to get rejected over and over. It's a bummer. I won't pretend it's not. Um, it's also challenging when your students, because a big part of what you do as a faculty is you're leading a research team. You're not the researcher anymore. One of the challenges, at least for me, was okay, I've had, I don't know, like 15 PhDs that have come out of my group since I've been here or something, and lots of masters and undergrads, and they're not all the same. Some of them are really good at being motivated and driven and they do things on their own. And others, and that was like how I was in grad school. Like my advisor never had to tell me what to do. But I've had PhD students where I'll check in on them and it's been a few months since we've had like a real deep dive into what they're doing maybe. And I'll start chatting with them like, what? What have you done the last month and a half? Like, and that was really surprising that some students need motivation and hand holding and checking in on. So I don't love that part of the job. I don't love a student that's not motivated or is really struggling and isn't willing to like take it on their own. Like that's just a challenge. Um, there's other challenges. There's a lot of, maybe we'll go to the next topic on academic life. We'll talk on some of these, but like, so your question was, apart from flexibility, autonomy, intellectual rewards, what are the other benefits or challenges that academia offers that people rarely talk about? One benefit I suppose you could say is like it is like a prestigious job. It's fun to tell people that you work at the university. There's like an implied level of prestige there, and like maybe you don't care about that, but it's kind of cool. Like I won't pretend it isn't. Like it's a cool thing to be recognized as like an important contributor to your community. I think that's rad. I think it's cool to work on campus because they inherently are where change is happening. Like each individual research group, you'll see people trying all sorts of crazy stuff. It's fun to be on the truly bleeding edge of new ideas. Um, I wish that universities as a whole were as flexible and agile as the individual faculty they're in. It's sort of the opposite. Universities tend to be really slow and stagnant, like things never change. There's so much inertia, this institutional inertia that's trying to like change and is really hard. Like even if it's something that we all agree on, like, hey, our qualifying exam is not really testing the students on what we need to test them. It's kind of a waste of their time. Let's change it. Oh my gosh, you're going to debate and argue and you're going to spend several faculty meetings to make that change, right? That's a bummer. But they are great. It's fun to be around young people. It's fun to be around the vibrant scene of a university where there is arts, right? There's concerts and there's theater, and you will get inevitably put on committees with people outside of your discipline, like sometimes way outside your discipline. And that's fun. It's fun to learn from the dude who does like snow science and is projecting when we're going to have awesome powder days at the university. That's fun to interact with people like that. Or the mining professor, or the music guy he's not a tenure track person. He's a career line faculty, and you learn about what their challenges are and what they're trying to do, and their teaching load is a lot higher, but they're doing this really cool music. So like that's fun. There's rewards and challenges for sure. It's a diverse job. It's not like a 9 to 5 crank out widget sort of job. Every day can be as different as you want it to be. This question is, how do you deal with politics in academia? Things like dealing with senior professors, authorship. What are you going to do if your students don't do as well as expected? Oh man, like my favorite quote here is the fighting or the battles in academia are only so bitter because the stakes are so small, right? And it seems very true to me. There are a lot of people who are like, yeah, fight to the death, like really are just really upset over like the dumbest stuff, the dumbest stuff. So you have to decide. Great advice is to stay out of department politics. Just stay out of it. Like there's always drama, and your best advice is to just stay out of it. Just take care of you and your group. Inevitably, drama will find you, and I'm no exception. I've had plenty of it here with my supervisors, with deans, with department chairs, as well as with people that I supervised when I was the associate chair, or me as a research advisor, or me in my director of grad affairs capacity. It's inevitable. You'll learn a lot about conflict management, and that's a good thing, right? Those are skills that spill over the rest of my life that are valuable. Learning how to take people who have very different points of view and figure out where they can have common ground, how you can align their interests. So even though their point of views didn't necessarily change, they're able to both pull together and achieve something. Like it's good. I actually honestly appreciate the growth opportunities it gives to me. Things like authorship. Some of these have very pragmatic solutions, like authorship. if you just talk about things ahead of time, then you avoid the problem in the first place, right? A lot of these can be avoided with good communication up front. This is something I do with my grad students, right? So I have like my mentor-mentee checklist that I've decided to start using with all my grad students, where all the stuff that could come up, like, am I allowed to go on vacation? How do you want to communicate? Who's going to be author? Like, what's it going to take to graduate? What are the citizenship requirements? Like all these different things. We just talk about it now. On day one, we have that conversation and we find whether we're in agreement. And if we're not, we come up with a plan on how we're going to make sure that we can function well as a team, because advisor and advisee are really a team. So good communication is key, and there's no shortcut to that. But mainly my advice is, if you're going to go into academia, just like avoid the drama, focus on the positive, stay out of politics, because it's not worth it. The stakes are always like so small. It's just like, who cares? Do I think tenure is still being protected today, and will it be in the future? Especially when you consider things like AI or the current U.S. political climate? That's a good question. I personally think that tenure does more harm than it does good. There's two big reasons cited for why tenure has been good in the past. One was like back in the day, if you taught like evolution and people saw that as like a threat to their religion, they would come and like pitchforks run you out of town. So tenure was there to protect unpopular but important truth that needed to be studied, right? Argument number two for tenure was that, it's job security. And since you're going to take a job that's essentially public service, where you're getting paid a lot less than the same skill would provide in industry, at least you're going to have job security. I think the second one is a little bit more of a compelling argument nowadays. The first argument, that you need protection of unpopular ideas, I don't think that's true. And I think it's actually gone too far the other way. Academia now uses its infrastructure to support basically a monoculture. It is very difficult to be in academia and have like a very different opinion. Obviously, politically, there's a huge lean politically towards left-leaning professors. It depends on the discipline. Engineering tends to be a little more conservative than all the other ones, but still, it's something like 75%, highly liberal, maybe 25% conservative. In a red state, growing up here, that's certainly where I'm sort of more aligned. But your average professor is like, highly, highly, highly liberal. It is a very politically charged environment. So if you don't toe the party line on any number of left-leaning issues, it's a bummer, right? People lost their jobs during when I was going up for tenure and through my associate professor, only until just last year, DEI reached crazy levels where faculty were getting fired because of insane things. So I don't think that first reason of protecting intellectual thought is actually doing what it was supposed to do. I think that in principle, we all want that, but in practice, tenure was doing the opposite. It was not it was not about diversity of ideas, right? It was not about equity, about equal opportunities. It was not about inclusion. It was about forcing discrimination and forcing a lot of things that if you didn't agree with, you could potentially even lose your job. So I think tenure needs to go. And then from a practical standpoint, I think tenure needs to go because you have faculty that are, very low productivity. And you can quantify that lots of different ways, like the research money they bring in, the number of PhD students they graduate, are they effective teachers? Like you get scored on all these criteria. And getting rid of a faculty who is not effective is way, way, way too hard. Sometimes not possible at some universities. Here at Utah, we have what's called tenure faculty review, where every 5 years after tenure, you get reviewed. And they ask like, okay, you got tenure. Are you still doing your job? This seems like so basic. But there are many faculty who are just dead wood. They are no longer being productive at all, but they expect to just be paid. That's crazy. So I think tenure mostly needs to go. The most compelling argument in my view is that it does make the job more compelling. And if you want to attract the best people to academia as opposed to industry, it needs to be compelling. But honestly, I would rather just get paid a little bit more. Like, give us a pay raise and ditch tenure. You could fire a bunch of faculty who are no longer being productive to afford it. Is sort of my overly simplistic view on that one. Entrepreneurship, you say here that many professors have ended up founding their own businesses or being tech advisors for companies. What are your thoughts on this? I think it's a great idea, especially if you're coming from engineering, where we are. Here at Utah, we have a great opportunity. They allow us to consult 1 day a week. That's amazing. Up to 8 hours a week, I can put towards consulting time, right? So I can go out and work with industry, help them solve their problems. And it's smart that they do that because it really ends up bringing research grants into the university. Like through some consulting I did with Ultradent Products, we ended up landing a 4-year research program with them, close to $500,000 of funding that sponsored a PhD student and helped them develop a bunch of great new products. It brought a PhD student here to do research. Like it's just great. So I love the idea of consulting. I think it's beneficial if it's allowed at your university. But founding your own companies is also great. It's not for everybody. It's really hard for one thing. Here at Utah, I've started 3 companies. One was a total disaster. It wasn't a disaster. It was actually a cool product. I keep it here on my desk as a reminder. Like we made a series of electrochromic films for goggles where I can, flip the switch and I can turn a little dial that tells it what, transparency I want. And in real time, you'll see this thing changing color. Basically on a ski hill, I could set the transparency and in real time, I would be able to have it change so that if you go in the trees or out of the trees, it will go to the appropriate light setting. And I think that's awesome. Like having that capability here. I've switched on the other one here. I've changed the settings so it's going to get darker. That was cool to turn this into a company. Take some of our research and find a way to commercialize it was awesome. But then figuring out it's not just about the invention, you have to have a business that can survive alongside of that and you have to be able to sell it was an amazing process for me to learn how hard it is to actually translate things out of the lab and be successful in that. It's great. Like for example, I'd been teaching a tech entrepreneurship class here at Utah before I started a company. And I'll tell you, that same year I tried to start this company, I learned so much. After trying it myself, when I talked to my students about picking the right partners, about having a good business plan, about testing the hypothesis, the leap of faith behind your business, like all those things, they meant so much more. And it made me such a better teacher. So I think it's great. And it helped me to go on to form 2 new companies, which have done really well. We have a paint company that's making glow in the dark roadway painting for bike paths. They can glow in the dark. Very cool. JCS Labs, you can check it out. And the other one, my podcast, which is both of those have been very, very successful because I failed trying it once myself. So I think it's great. There's been a big move, at least in material science in particular, towards academics really like taking leaves of absence, leaving a university or going on like reducing their percent effort down to like 20% or something so that they can spend time in industry. It's awesome. There's a real moment happening right now, and we'll see if it pays off for those folks, but I think it might. And then do you think it's beneficial to establish a business using your professor's reputation? How are the return incentives? Yeah, I think a lot of companies, at least in like the AI for material space where I do my research, there's a lot of that happening right now. You've got Aaron Walsh, you've got Andrew White, you've got Rafael Gomez-Bombarella, you've got lots and lots. Surya Kaladindi. I could go on. There's Eric Tober, right? There's so many of these people, and pulling in an academic pulls in a lot of credibility. That's what you're basically getting. You're getting more than that. Credibility is the big one, though. You're also getting access to their research capability. You're getting access to their student pipeline. You're getting access to their partnerships and relationships, right? So just like any business partner, you have to think about what's the benefit of this partner versus someone else. What do they bring to the table? What are we potentially willing to lose to give to that person? I think a faculty who is only going to be nominally involved as an advisor, you're not going to get much out of that relationship. But if they can actually put significant amount of their time on the project, a month, 2 months, maybe they leave their job for a year on sabbatical to work on it with you, then you're going to get a really big return on that investment, is my view. Okay, and then the last category is like personal well-being. Are you happy? Are you fulfilled? How do you feel? I feel great. I am very happy. I mean, that's my nature. I'm a happy person. I'm an optimist. I'm an excited about the world person. So I love this job. I've said it for years that this is my dream job to have this. It's an absolute dream to work here. It is deeply satisfying for different reasons than I thought. Like the discoveries are very satisfying, but honestly, the thing that's most satisfying are my students and their successes. The mentoring has blown me away how much I love to mentor students. Like that's the best part of the job. I have things like this hanging on my board in front of me on my cork board where a student says, Spark, you help me know, You help me more than you'll know. Thank you for showing me the strengths and setting me on my path to success. And this dude was just like the president of a company now. He's done like so well. Somebody who a lot of people didn't take a chance on because he was a non-traditional student. Like that type of experience, boy, that is a real payday. It's awesome. When a student lands a job, when they publish a paper and they're so excited, when they learn a new skill, when you see them successfully like defend a concept, or somebody challenges their work and they can stand up and defend it themselves, like that's awesome. That's honestly probably the best part of the job. So deeply fulfilling. I love the mentoring part of the job, and I love the discovery part. I love being able to tackle new and hard problems, especially now that I'm a full professor and sort of I have a little more freedom to focus on what matters to me, regardless of the impact of, or regardless of like the publishability or anything else like that. Like just pick the problems that you think are important and go after them. What are your motivations to make you go to work every day now that you're a professor? Do you still experience that same sense of excitement, that dopamine rush in your role? I will not pretend that it's the same. The first time that you go in a classroom and there's 150 students in there and it's chattering and you have to like, let's get started, right? And it goes quiet and everyone's looking at you. That's a cool experience the first time. And I always get a little bit of butterfly in my stomach every time I teach a new class, but it's never like that first time, right? That was truly exciting and terrifying. You've never taught before and you're doing your best to figure it out. It definitely becomes a little more routine, but it's still exciting. What motivates me now is different probably than when I was back then, but I definitely feel excitement for this job. I am more deliberate now about choosing things to work on that I think matter and will make a difference in the world. So we've got our dental project, right? We're trying to make better fillings for your teeth. I think that's a big deal that can really help people. Like we're picking projects that we think matter. I love this question. How does your faith affect your career? Pointing out that this guy's going to be a Catholic convert soon. So first off, congrats. I think that every man, I can't remember who originally said it, but we all have a God-shaped hole in our heart or in our soul. I think that's true. I think that whether you realize it or accept it or not, I think people are seeking for connection with God. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We are sometimes called the Mormons, but we believe in Jesus Christ, and that is a profound part of my life. It influences the decisions I make daily. I believe in what people would call the supernatural. I believe in prayer. I believe in praying and asking God, what should I work on? How should I tackle this problem? How should I deal with this conflict with this student? What's an important use of my time? How should I balance my kids and this career opportunity? Those are all things that I legitimately seek God's guidance on. So when you say, how does it affect my career path? It dramatically does. Like I've got written on my board behind me, diligence, vigor, and enthusiasm, because I was, told through prayer when I was a kid that those would be the keys to me being a successful technologist in my life. And I take it seriously. I think about the projects I work on. Like I will only be successful if I am diligent, if I really keep working on this, if I have vigor, like if I bring some excitement and some enthusiasm. Heaven knows that's helped me as I've been a science communication expert on YouTube and through my podcast. And then enthusiasm, like bringing that excitement and imagination to projects and not getting bummed out by the defeats. So faith is a huge role in my life. We believe in a lay clergy in our church where none of us are paid, but we all have jobs in the church. I got my full-time job here at the university, but I also spend significant time every week preparing lessons on Sunday, but also hosting activities for the young men in our ward, our local congregation, where we teach them how to grow up to be men, right? And it's deeply fulfilling and rewarding, and I love it. So philosophically, what are your goals in life as a professor? Any other stories or reflections you want to share? I want to do something meaningful with my career. I think that there's a lot of jobs out there where you can do something and get paid, and by having a great income, maybe that will enable you to enjoy your 5 to 9, right? Your 9 to 5 is when you're working, and then from 5 until 9 in the next morning, sometimes we call that the 5 till 9. And I think a lot of people only look for fulfillment in their 5 to 9. I feel blessed to be a professor where I can find fulfillment all day, whether I'm here at work, when I'm making a video like this, whether I'm teaching a class, whether I'm writing a research grant, whether I'm analyzing data. or whether I'm doing it outside of work, spending time with my family, or spending time developing skills and hobbies I like, playing music, enjoying sports, spending time with my dog. I have bees, raising bees, like all these things. Like I love having a well-rounded, full life. Anyways, I appreciate these questions. It's been fun to reflect on. It's been 13 years in academia. It's been fun to reflect on the path from from postdoc, right? When I didn't even get a job, all the way now, 13, 14 years later as a full professor. So I appreciate it. And this was fun. We might do some more of these in the future. If people have additional questions, I'd love to hear them. You can obviously drop them in the chat below if there's enough. Maybe I'll do a second video following up on some of those. But thanks to Tuan Trong for making this happen. And we'll see you guys in the next video.